Abner managed to get a successful and impressive split decision, although it really shouldn't have been a split decision, victory over Jesus Andres Cuellar to get the WBA Featherweight Championship. Very impressive win for Abner. I thought it was actually a pretty close. I wouldn't want to say outright dominant, but close to dominant display over Cuellar. He pretty much controlled the entire fight, controlled the entire pace of the fight. He seemed just a little bit too quick and a little bit too sharp for Cuellar overall. I don't know what the hell Kermit Bayless was watching, because there is no way in hell that Cuellar should have won that fight. He got dropped in the 11th round. Mars outlanded him. Mars landed the cleaner shots against him. He landed the harder shots against him. Between the two of them, Cuellar was the only one that ever looked hurt. Mars was able to show good defense against Cuellar. Cuellar was able to land occasional kind of one punch at a time. But even then, the shots weren't landing the most clearly, the most cleanly, and definitely not more consistently than what Mars was doing. Abner boxed very, very nicely. Boxed probably better than he has in a few years. Really, probably since the Daniel Ponce de Leon victory. Of course, since that tough loss to Johnny Gonzalez, he had looked, a bit iffy. He looked a little bit up and down. Some of the fights he looked okay. So, he looked. It's like he was just trying to kind of piece everything together. He wasn't quite sure what type of fighter he wanted to be, whether he wanted to be an inside fighter, an outboxer, a guy that was a bit more on the move, a guy that was a bit more of a high volume guy. Against Leo Santa Cruz, I felt like he chose really the wrong strategy in that fight. He went in there looking to kind of break Leo Santa Cruz's will and try to break his stamina. He just went right at Santa Cruz and just tried to, win a war of attrition against him. Santa Cruz, for his work though, is, he's still one of the leaders in the CompuBox, record thing, for however much weight you put in that. I don't put too much stock in that, but I do think that it's, a generally okay gauge. But considering the fact that Santa Cruz has such a high percentage of landing punches compared to the number of percentage of punches landed against him, I mean, he's a very, very tough fighter to beat. Santa Cruz has a very good jab, a very good high guard. He kind of reminds me of Winky Wright in the way that he's able to just put that guard up and just physically manhandle a lot of guys just by walking right at him. He's built like a fucking tank. In spite of the fact that he's not even really like a big, brutal, burly guy at 126 pounds the way that Cuellar is. He's really more of a lean, kind of a lanky, stringy type of build. Of course, Mars though is a small guy for the weight as well. So he's a guy that could potentially fight at 122 or 118. Should he choose to in the future, or should he have chosen to just overall in his career. But in spite of that, Mars came through and just showed that he was the better fighter overall against Cuellar. He just had too much of everything, too much speed, a little bit too much power, perhaps a little bit too much pop. Definitely coming from that hand speed, catching guys by surprise, and definitely too much skill. He pretty much handled Cuellar on every facet of the game, and to me, won probably about 9 or 10 out of the 12 rounds, really. And along with the knockdown, that's a clear-cut victory for Abner Mares. A very impressive victory as well, over a guy who was looked at as extremely dangerous coming into this fight, considering the level of physicality that Cuellar puts into his fights. So, of course, this is a great win from Abner Mares. As for his near future, of course, this is the WBA regular belt that he has right now. Carl Frampton is going to be rematching Leo Santa Cruz for the super title at featherweight. So depending on who wins that, we may see the winner of that fight competing against Abner Mares in the near future to hopefully continue to unify these WBA belts. They've been kind of dragging their feet on this whole unification thing in all their weight classes. And then they even have an interim champion, Carlos Zambrano, who's going to be fighting TMC fighter Claudio Marrero in the near future. So hopefully they can, clean up that whole thing as well after those two have their fight. And it's a pretty interesting fight as well. I'll definitely be doing a preview of that fight when it comes about. That's a fight that I'm pretty interested in. But overall, just a great victory for Abner Mares. Him against either Frampton or Leo Santa Cruz, I think is still a fantastic fight. I think with a different game plan, he could be a little bit more troublesome to Santa Cruz. Although stylistically, I think Santa Cruz is really the tougher matchup for Mars. So it actually might behoove him to be rooting for Carl Frampton instead of rooting for Leo Santa Cruz and the opportunity to get revenge. Just because I think that Frampton matches up a little bit better for for Mars. He doesn't necessarily have to go lunging in as much. It'd be a little bit more of a battle of hand speed as opposed to a battle of stamina and volume. Um, Outside of that, if he was to fight, the other titleists, I think those would be great fights as well. Oscar Valdez probably wouldn't happen just because the Top Rank and PBC don't really work together quite that much. But who knows? Schaefer apparently it was the promoter of this whole card with Mars and Cuellar and Williams and Charlo, and so maybe he's able to get some things done with Bob Arum. Of course they did the Terrence Crawford versus John Molina fight as well. So that shows a little bit of cross promotion going on there. I wouldn't mind seeing it. Definitely, it'd be a very very interesting fight. Two former Mexican Olympians. Funny enough. Abner Mars, former pound for pounder, really. Still a top level featherweight, even though he's a little bit undersized for the weight class. Oscar Valdez, definitely a featherweight on the rise, featherweight champion on the rise, looking very impressive recently. Otherwise, of course, there's Lee Selby out there whenever he chooses to actually fight again, because I've been wondering exactly when he's going to have another fight. Same with Gary Russell Jr. The two of them have kind of almost frozen themselves out of the overall, not even just title picture, but fight picture. They're very, very inactive for world champions. I wouldn't mind seeing him against either of them either. Be very fun fights to watch, especially in light of the fights that Russell had with Lomachenko and Selby had with Montiel. I think the speed overall of Abner Mars hand and foot could be very troublesome for either or both of them. So that's pretty much all I got to say on the Abner Mars versus Jesus Cuellar fight. Fantastic win for Mars, and I'm looking forward to what happens in his near future. Cuellar, I wouldn't be surprised if Cuellar moved up to 130. I wouldn't even be surprised if he might have been a little bit drained for the featherweight fight. He definitely looked very badly gassed in the later rounds of this fight. I'd say a lot of that though has to do with the fact that Mars kept a very high pace. Very similar to the fight that Cuellar had a few years back, when he wasn't quite as good of a fighter as he is now, but still a fight against a similar level of opponent. Again, in Oscar Escandon, Escandon was able to actually basically make Cuellar quit in that fight. He gassed Cuellar out and just set a high pace that Cuellar couldn't keep up with after a while. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see Cuellar play his trade at 130 in the near future either. And he's still a very dangerous fighter to come up against. So I think I see him being a very viable opponent in the near future as well. So that's pretty much all I got to say on the Mars versus Cuellar fight, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.